I'm Coach Corey Wayne, and this is my video coaching newsletter. And the topic of this newsletter is going to be considerations before starting a business. Don't do it! No, I'm just kidding. I've got a quote that I want to share with you. It's from Cicero. It's very obviously important to this, what we're going to talk about in this video here. He says, before beginning, plan carefully. And I've got another one from General Colin Powell. He says, there are no secrets to success. It is the result of preparation, hard work, and learning from failure. So I got this email, and he says, hi Corey, my name is Bob, and I'm 52 years old. I like and trust what you have to say on many topics, such as relationships and business, and I also read your articles from time to time based on dating, relationships, pickup, health. But today I have a business question. I would like to start my own online barbecue takeout business, something similar to Domino's Pizza. So far I have purchased equipment and went with a website company to build a website for me. But this is going to take more than I realize. That's what happens to most people when they decide to start a business. They go, holy shit, I had no idea. He says, it's going to take more than I realized to get this off the ground. Yeah, it's true, because, I mean, I've been an entrepreneur pretty much my whole life. And even when I was in my early 20s, I was starting little businesses or business on the side. And after a few months or 6 months or a year or two, I realized, I'm not really that passionate, really not that into it. And I say this all the time, it's so important. It's like if you're going to start a business, you got to start something you have a passion for. Ideally something you really love and you're excited about. Because when you're starting a business from scratch, this is the bottom fucking line. And anybody that's ever started a business from scratch will tell you this. It's always going to take a hell of a lot longer to make it successful, to make it profitable, to figure out your business model than you think it's going to take. So if you think it's going to take you 2 years, it's probably going to take you 4 or 5 years to figure it out on a good day. And you got to plan for that. You always got to know your downside and everything. In other words, what happens is, despite your best planning and your best research and studying other people that already have successful businesses, it just, things don't work out like you think they're going to. What do you do in that case? And another thing that always comes up is, not only does it take longer than you think it's going to, it always takes way more capital than you think it's going to take. Like I remember when I started my first company, like my first real estate company, that was back in '96. And I remember it was like right around November, October, which is about 6 months after I had started the company. I had bought 2 properties, foreclosure properties, and I quit my job working for Syntex Rooney as a project engineer, which is a very stable income. At the time, Syntex was the largest construction company in the world at the time. I worked on the Coronado Springs Resort at Disney World. It was a $150 million job. And so I left that steady job, left working with all those really awesome, smart, talented people. A lot of them are way smarter than I was. And yet here I am, this young kid basically, going to go out and start his own business. Obviously it's very risky. And I mean, at the end of the day, if you have a good idea for a business, the key is you got to do something that you're really passionate about. Why? Well, just like I was talking about in my early 20s, one thing I remember I was into was saltwater fish tanks. And so I was going to make filtration systems out of plexiglass, the kind of stuff that you usually see. And once I got into it and the equipment that you needed to weld the seams together and all that stuff, I was like, wow, that's a lot more involved than I thought it was going to be. And I really loved saltwater fish tanks. I had mini reef tanks, so I had live coral and all kinds of cool shit in my tank. But it was just like a hobby, so I thought, hey, this would be a cool thing to explore, and I messed around with it for 6 months, a year, and I finally, I had a passion for fish tanks, but my passion for starting that particular business just wasn't there. And that's why it's important to learn to listen to your heart and trust your internal guidance, if you will, and follow your heart, your curiosity, and your intuition. And if you haven't found something that you're passionate about yet, keep looking. The worst thing that you can do is to go out and, like in this particular case, he's hired a website guy. And he's already starting to buy some equipment and stuff like that. And now he's realizing, oh my God, it's going to cost more, because there's licensing that you have to do. I mean, obviously, if you're going to prepare food, the health department is going to want to have a chat with you, and it's going to, obviously, if you've got a restaurant, you've got to, every city, every state is going to be different as far as regulations. And obviously, if you're in a different country, obviously, it's going to be completely different than what we're going to have here in the States. But you got to find out from your local authorities, like, because you'll have to have a occupation, like here, I'm here in Orlando, and I remember when I used to have my real estate companies here, I had to have an occupation license from the city, I had to have an occupation license from the county, and we had 6 different companies between my partner, actually 7 different companies. My partner had a title company, but we had 7 different companies. And so you can imagine, you got like 2 or 3 occupation licenses, like $200-300 a year for each company, just to have a company. Even whether you're making money or not, it doesn't matter. You still got to fucking pay that money every year. And so you got to find all these things. You got to figure these things out, because you don't want to go and open your business and then have the health department walk in one day and go, oh, you don't have the proper permit, and they just shut you down. So you obviously got to do your research and find out what rules and regulations that you've got to go through. But like I said, in your particular case, you know, my question to you is like, do you really love do you love barbecue? Is it do you have an absolute burning desire, passion? I mean, give me an example, like this business that I have now, being a full-time life coach. I've been at it as a full-time company for 7 years. And I remember those first few years, it's like I remember I was buying ads in Men's Fit. It was like $10,000 for a full-page ad. You book the ad, and then you got to wait like 90 days for the public, the magazine to actually go out to subscribers and stuff. So that I put an ad in, I'm just basically twiddling my thumbs waiting for the thing to hit, because if you got any business, first thing you got to have customers, right? You can have the best business in the world, serve the best food, or have the best product, but nobody knows that you're in business, and nobody knows what your value proposition is, and it really doesn't fucking matter, because you don't have paying customers. You're not going to stay in business very long. And it was interesting, because I had a lot of success in my 20s. I mean, I was busy as fuck in my 20s. When I was going to school, when I was 21, I was tending bar. I was working at night, and I also had these other business ideas that I was looking and researching. But the thing is that when things got difficult or they got hard, I basically quit and I dropped it, and I went on to something else. And it's important to be able to do that, because if you choose something and you don't really have a burning desire to do it, if you don't feel like it's your purpose and your mission, and it's like a business you have a passion for. I mean, when you look at the biggest and the most successful companies in the world, you look at like Apple, or you look at Google, or Facebook, some of these newer companies, or like Square or Twitter, like some of the companies that Jack Dorsey has started. I mean, these guys had a passion for, it's like Mark Zuckerberg. He's just, he's a college kid. He's thinking, hey, let's build this social network thing. It'd be kind of cool. We can get everybody connected and meet people, and he never had any intention of making it into a business. It was just a hobby. It's just like my background is construction management. I have an engineering degree from the College of Engineering and Design at FIU, and I'm a full-time life coach. And this basically started out for me as just a hobby, because I was helping myself and trying to improve my life. And I remember those first few years, I mean, especially when you go through a couple $100,000 of your savings, you go, wow, that's not a lot of fun to spend all that money and not have a lot to show for it. And because there's a lot of trial and error, especially if you're, like in your case, you're starting a brand new business. And so obviously the first thing you got to consider is, do you really want to do this? Do you love barbecue so much? Do you have a passion for it? And if you do love barbecue that much, I mean, do people what about your friends and family? Come on, they really like it? Is it that good? Is the food that awesome? We're always going, when are you going to when are you grilling out? When am I going to come over? I mean, are your friends and family saying things like that to you? You got to look at those things. Like when you look at people that have very successful restaurants, like say the Cheesecake Factory, big chain. I think they have Lux Cafe is another one. Obviously, those people had a real fucking passion for food. You can see it in their restaurants. You can see it in the presentation. You can see it in their constantly changing and evolving menus. And you can see it in the quality of the food. You can go to a restaurant all over the country. I think they have them, I don't know if they have them overseas or not, but it's like going to McDonald's. It's like you get the same Big Mac, and they taste the same no matter where you are, because they had high standards. The people that build those businesses really loved what they were doing. They had a real passion for it. Like the guy that started Kentucky Fried Chicken, the Colonel. I mean, he was at it for the better part. I think he went to close to 10,000 people over the course of 5 or 6 years. I mean, this guy is like in his 60s, and he's on Social Security driving around in a station wagon. He's like, hey, I got this Kentucky Fried Chicken recipe, and I'd like to license it to you, and you sell the chicken. And people are like, nah, that's a dumb idea. I mean, you imagine the guy, he was on Social Security, he was retired, his family's thinking, you're fucking nuts, dude, what are you doing? And so he had a passion for it because he really thought his recipe was that awesome. And so if your idea is really that great, are you going to be willing to drive around in a station wagon for 5 fucking years? I mean, think about it. Sometimes you have to do and endure things a lot longer. And I mean, at the end of the day, as an entrepreneur, it's like you always think your next idea or the next tweak that you do to your business is going to be the thing that really makes it take off. But the reality is, it's little tweaks here and there over the course of several years. You learn what works, you learn what doesn't work, because there's a lot of trial and error. When something doesn't work, what do? You try something else. And so to cut down on your trial and error, what you got to do is go out and find people, go out and find businesses that are already really successful at what you're doing. Like I know in Orlando, or city Orlando where I'm at, there was a couple barbecue places that, like one of them's been around for 30, 40 years, I think it is, been the same location. And the food's really great. The restaurant's kind of dumpy looking. It's kind of like a, almost like you order it and you kind of sit at tables. It's not like a regular high-end restaurant or anything like that. And there was another one, there's like a chain of 3 or 4 restaurants here, and that's all they did was barbecue. And they had a great concept. The food was fantastic, but at the end of the day, if your food sucks, people aren't going to come back. And you're going to be constantly working against the negative word of mouth of people who don't like your food and trying to overcome that. And so my advice to you would be to go and find other businesses that are already really doing great and are insanely successful at the type of business that you want to create. Maybe you might want to even consider going to work for them for 6 months to a year so you can learn all the ins and outs of that business. Because if you go and start a brand new business, you got to figure out everything completely on your own. It's all trial and error. And why spend years and years and years trying to figure out that stuff and make all the mistakes when you can go work for a company who's basically figured out all the mistakes and made all the mistakes that cost them tens of thousands of dollars, and then you can put your unique spin when you open your own type of shop. So those are important things to consider. And so I wrote some other things down here to mention. It's like, how are you going to go about getting your customers? How are you going to advertise? What is the advertising going to cost you? Because you got to find. Are you going to have a physical location, or like in your case, is it strictly an internet type based business where you deliver? There was a company I was reading about yesterday, as a matter of fact. It was a guy, it's an entrepreneur, and he's got I think the business is based out of California. And basically what they do is, what they started doing was going to companies and provide, because if you got a company that's got, say, 40, 50 employees, well, obviously everybody's not going to like the same kind of food. And so that's kind of the problem. The company wants to do takeout, and you always got, because you got so many people, some people like burgers and fries, and you got other people that are vegetarian, and you got other people who want sushi. And so they basically put together a business to where, like if a company says, hey, we're all working together, we're having this big meeting, and we want to provide food for everybody today. And so what they do is they basically provide the service to the menu and everything. And so the employees do the ordering, and then they show up with all the food. It's a really cool business idea. But things like that, and that particular entrepreneur had been through, I think, like a dozen different concepts and ideas for technology type businesses before he found a business model that clicked, that worked, that people were like, hey, that's a great idea. We could really use that kind of a business with what we want to do. And so you gotta look at things like that. What are you going to charge for your food? I mean, because a lot of people go, it's like you got to look at what other people are offering, what other people are charging for similar types of food. What are you going to sell? Are you going to just sell strictly barbecue? Are there other items that you're going to put on the menu? I mean, you got to figure out all of those things. And another thing that's key is you got to let go of your prejudices. In other words, and I'm not talking about racial kind of stuff. I'm talking about, in other words, your own internal prejudice or the way you think things should be. You got to be willing to let go of your need to be right if you're going to be an entrepreneur, because entrepreneurs, successful ones, are slow to change their mind, but we're always quick to change our approach when something isn't working. So you've got to be able to adapt to change. You've got to be able, what happens when you do an advertising campaign and you get 3 customers and it costs you thousands of dollars to run that advertising campaign? That sucks, because once that money's spent, you don't get it back. And so I would also encourage you, if you're going to study other businesses, how do they go about, the ones that are already succeeding, how are they going about getting their customers in the door? Because it's interesting. When you look at the most common businesses that fail, the number one business that fails more than any types of business is food businesses, restaurant business. And think about that for a second. So there's a lot of people just like you who are like, I got this great idea for a restaurant. I got this great idea for a food product. And the statistics, the odds are not in your favor. And that's why only reason you want to be doing this is if you got a burning desire to do it. If you love fucking barbecue, barbecue is your thing. If you live, eat, breathe barbecue. And if you don't feel that way about it, then I highly encourage you to reconsider going into this and start looking for something that you can sink your teeth into, something that excites you, something that gives you goosebumps when you think about it. Let's see here. I've got a few other things. One of the things that's important about a business is if you got something to offer to somebody, it's like, why? You got to think about this. Why should your potential customer, in other words, why should they give a shit about you and what you have to offer? In other words, the customer wants to know, what's in it for me? What do I get out of it? How do I benefit from this? In other words, it's like, why should you warrant my time, basically? The other thing is, how many customers do you need to break even? You've got to do your budget. You got to figure out what your rent's going to be, all your fees, your taxes, your licensing. I mean, just to start a business like this, you're going to be spending thousands of dollars just to open your doors before you spend any money on advertising or anything else between equipment, buying supplies, buying food, all that stuff. So there's a lot of little things in there, just like you're finding. It's like, wow, it's a lot more than I realized. So when things get difficult, if you're not passionate about it, you'll quit and go do something else. And you don't want to be going, fuck, I did that for 6 months and I wasted 50 grand. And because what happens is you go and you start a business and then it fails. And then for the average person, that's the only time in their lives they'll ever step outside their comfort zone and take some real risks. And so they stay and they think, it's not in the cards for me. I'm not smart enough. I don't have enough education. I wasn't able to figure it out before I ran out of money, whatever it happens to be. And those people give up. And you don't want to do that. You want to do things or set yourself up to succeed by always knowing your downside and going through your numbers, figuring out all of these things that we're discussing here. So you got to put together a budget and you're going to have to stick to it. And so what happens if you think you're going to be profitable in 6 months? What happens if 2.5 years later you still ain't making money? What are you going to do then? Give up, close shop, or keep persevering? I'll tell you what, after two and a half years and you spent tens of thousands of dollars and you're still losing money on it, maybe you're working a job somewhere else and doing this part-time, or I don't know, maybe. But the bottom line is that you got to figure at what point are you going to say, that's it, I've spent too much money, I can't afford to lose any more of my nest egg or my savings or my working capital. So you got to look at those things. You got to figure out how much you're willing to lose before you say, and it's the same thing, like if you've ever had a company where you want to bring in investors, it's one of the things you discuss with an investor. It's like, how much are they willing to put in? And at what point are they willing to throw their hands up in the air and walk away and say, this concept just isn't working, or this business model isn't working? And one of the things that a strategic planner once taught me, he said there's no such thing as a bad idea, only bad plans. Remember the quote that I shared in the beginning? What Cicero said? Before beginning, plan carefully. So those are some basic things that you're going to want to consider for your business. I mean, there's a lot of other things we can discuss, but those are really the basics. I mean, you really have to sit down and think about, is this what I really want to do? And if you're 100% certain you want to go into this barbecue business, then the next step before you buy anything else, before you buy any more equipment, before you hire any web developers, or you do any of that bullshit, you've got to go out and find companies or restaurants that are already succeeding at what it is that you want to do. You don't want to go out and copy their exact business model. You obviously want to offer things that you want to do, but you got to look and see what is making that business successful. Why has that business been successful, and why did they succeed where so many other people in the restaurant business have failed? Because the idea is, by modeling the success of other people, if you apply the same things that you learn from them, and you apply them in your own life or your own business, then you'll get the same kinds of results. Because otherwise, if you try to do it all on your own through trial and error, it may take you a decade. And why spend that much time trying to figure out your business model when you can go work for somebody else, or go research another restaurant or a chain, or maybe there's a franchise out there that you can go buy into, and they've got the business in the box basically, and you've got to lease a space and pay their franchise fee, but you got all the support, and you got a business model that you know that works. You know how to bring in customers, those types of things. So those are other things that you definitely want to look at, possibly buying a franchise as opposed to completely starting your business from scratch. But those are some basic questions that'll help you get started. And if you would like me to help you personally to figure out what a business to go into, or if you want me to look at the business that you already have, you're trying to tweak a business or improve a business or do a business turnaround, or if your business was doing well for a while and things are going sideways and you're just kind of barely staying afloat, or you want to grow things in a measured way, go to my website right now, click the products tab, which will be at the top of your screen, and just follow the instructions for booking a paid phone coaching session. And I will talk to you soon.